Hey guys, No Huddle Fantasy Sports here, and it is Friday, November 22nd. Unfortunately, this video is a day late because NFL Week 12 is already underway. But of course, you're here for all the right reasons, and that's because you want to get NFL Week 12 fantasy football started on the right foot, and that's just what we're doing here today. We're talking about Week 12's notable matchups, defense versus position. That's those players, offenses, and teams that are in the best spots based upon points given up fantasy-wise by given defenses. So if all of that information sounds right, if you're looking to get your Week 12 off on the right foot and dominate in fantasy football, I've got all that information and more upcoming. Yo, what is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to the video. This is No Huddle Fantasy Sports and the Week 12 Notable Matchups video here on YouTube. Of course, you've heard the spiel in the first couple of seconds. We're talking about defense versus position data here, which players, offenses, and teams, according to updated stats, are in the best spots this weekend, specifically which defenses really are giving up the most amount of points to each position. So we break it all down so you can understand which spots to attack in both season long and DFS. Of course, if you're new here or simply haven't checked out a No Huddle Fantasy Sports matchup video in the past, we also have more than just this video. If you go down into the description, there is a link. It'll take you to all of our matchup data that's updated each and every week. We're talking about quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. All of the matchup data in terms of teams that are giving up the most amount of points, defenses giving up the most amount of points to those specific positions, and I'm talking about ranks 1 through 32. In this video, we're only going to talk about the top ones, the top 5, so that might be helpful to not only follow along, but to understand if you're looking at any other players that aren't discussed in this video, where they rank in terms of matchups. And last, but certainly probably the most important thing here is I just want to give a quick thanks to all of you that are tuning in, all of you that are already subscribers. The channel continues to grow each and every week. It's so exciting to see where this channel continues to go. Of course, if you're viewing this and aren't subscribed, go ahead, smash that subscribe button. I put a lot of time, a lot of effort into these videos, and it really does. If you want to give back, the easiest way you can give back and make sure you support No Huddle Fantasy Sports and support this channel and myself is simply make sure you are subscribed and give this video a thumbs up if it's helping you. So that's enough with all that junk. Let's get into the meat of this video and take a quick look back to Week 11, talk about some defensive notes we can take from that week, see if there's any spots that are worth considering, worth commenting on. First up, I have Arizona here. They've actually been on the list here for a note for the last couple of weeks because they continue to get crushed through the air. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo for the second time in 3 weeks throw up big numbers against them, and that is a run-heavy offense he plays in. But they gave up, Arizona that is, their defense gave up 424 passing yards last week, bringing their average over the last 3 games to now 367 yards. So that high-tempo offense, that weak secondary, it's starting to play out more and more each week. A good offense you can attack, a good defense you can attack with opposing quarterbacks and receivers. Cincinnati last week, they gave up 112 rushing yards to Josh Jacobs, a pretty chalk play across the board, but that was a 4.9 rushing yard average against him. So Cincinnati continues to show weakness as a run defense. Oakland, the flip side of that game, they allowed actually a 7.9 yards per carry average to Cincinnati. Cincinnati ran down their throat with 173 total yards. So take that into consideration. Oakland isn't a very stout run-stop defense right now. Carolina, we saw Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley for Atlanta combined for 14 receptions and a massive 234 yards. Carolina's just generally weak across all of their defensive fronts, whether that's stopping the run or stopping the pass. A very, very susceptible defense you can attack week in and week out with fantasy players. Finally here, Buffalo. I'll try to go a little bit outside the box here and think about which teams are giving up the most amount of receptions to running backs. Well, if you look over the last couple of weeks, specifically the last 3 games, Buffalo gave up 23 receptions to running backs. So certainly something to consider here. They're a team that is a pretty good defense, and as a result seems to be funneling the ball, funneling passes down to checkdowns and running backs. So something again to consider moving forward. But in terms of matchup data here, let's jump right to the quarterback position. Our top 5 defenses entering Week 12 right now: Tampa Bay, Cincinnati, Detroit, Miami, and Oakland. Tampa Bay and Cincinnati really sticking out at the top here. Tampa Bay is giving up over 24 points on DraftKings, over 20, nearly 23 points on FanDuel. They face off against Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta against Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan certainly in a great spot this weekend and should be able to take advantage of that very weak Tampa Bay secondary. Cincinnati, a team that just gets crushed across all fronts. We talked about running backs against them. I don't really think they're this bad because of, I talked about it last week, I think, with the amount of points they've given up to quarterbacks such as Lamar Jackson on the ground a couple times already this year. I think they might fall a little bit lower, but nonetheless, a weak defense. Mason Rudolph in a good spot. Detroit third on the board here. Facing off against Washington and Haskins, if you'd want to take a shot there, I definitely wouldn't. That's a terrible offense, a very bad situation at quarterback. Miami, another team in the top 5 here in terms of who you can attack with quarterbacks, facing off against Baker Mayfield, who, let's see if he can do something this weekend, has struggled most of the year, but certainly in a good spot this weekend. And rounding out the top 5 here, we have Oakland giving up over 21 points on DraftKings and over 20 on FanDuel, facing off against the Jets and Darnold this weekend. So, again, a good spot for Darnold and the Jets against a very weak Oakland defense and secondary. Moving on to the running back positions here, our top 5 teams or defenses that you can attack with running backs right now based upon DvP data. That's Detroit, Green Bay, Cincinnati, Carolina, and Washington. Detroit is a funnel run defense right now. A decent secondary, they can stop the pass. At least they're average against that, but certainly getting murdered on the ground. DraftKings especially, 32 plus points on DraftKings to the running back position given up by Detroit's defense. If you compare that to second here, and that's Green Bay, they're nearly 3 points ahead of them. But FanDuel 28 plus given up by Detroit to running backs, facing off again against a very weak offense in Washington. Maybe not something we can really take advantage of this weekend, but you have Juice, who I believe is playing more now, and Peterson. Green Bay, another run-heavy, run-funnel defense that you can attack with the run game, facing off primetime game here, so consider that for DFS against San Francisco and Coleman, who's in a good spot, especially with some injuries to that backfield, leaving him as almost the lone horse. Cincinnati, a team I do like to attack each and every week with running backs, facing off against the Steelers. Unfortunately, there's a lot of injury and uncertainty in that backfield. James Conner is the guy you'd want if he starts, but he's been pretty banged up. So you have Jalen Samuels, Benny Snell Jr., a bunch of other guys you might want to consider. Carolina, a team also giving up a ton of yards, rounding out at number 4 here in terms of who you can attack with the running backs, facing off against New Orleans and Kamara, who's in a great spot each and every week due to his ability out of the backfield to catch the ball, but certainly facing a very weak run defense in Carolina. And rounding out the top 5 here, Washington Redskins giving up nearly 28 on DraftKings, 24 plus on FanDuel to running backs each and every week. I really, really like, I believe you pronounce it Scarborough. He came in relief last week for Detroit, just got recently picked up, ran real hard. It looks like a physical runner that certainly is better than anybody else they have. So certainly a guy you might want to consider this week against a very weak Washington run defense. Jumping over to the wide receiver position here, we have Tampa Bay, New York Jets, New York Giants, Carolina, and Atlanta, rounding out the top 5 defenses that are most susceptible to giving up points to the wide receiver position. Tampa Bay, we talked about how favorable a matchup Matt Ryan is in. Well, of course, that means his receivers are also in a great spot here, giving up 47 plus points on DraftKings PPR sites, 39 plus on FanDuel. Just take that in comparison with the New York Jets, who are number 2 here. They're giving up, that's Tampa Bay's giving up nearly 6 more fantasy points per game to wide receivers compared to the number 2 worst team in the NFL. So, again, you want to really attack them with Atlanta Falcons this week. Jones and Ridley, great spot for them. New York Jets, I mentioned they're number 2 here. You're looking at Williams and Renfro for the Oakland Raiders. So, again, good spot for that team. Good spot for Oakland to attack the Jets. We then have the New York Giants here. Unfortunately, we're talking about Trubinsky and the Chicago Bears that are going up against them. Really don't like that attack, that passing attack, but I do really love Allen Robinson. I think he's an extremely underrated, underutilized player, but he's in a great spot this week versus the Giants. So is Gabriel and any other receiver for that Bears offense. We then have Carolina here. Again, I talked about how bad of a defense they've really turned out to be in general, but you're talking about the New Orleans Saints against them, Thomas, Ginn Jr. You really need no reason to play Thomas each and every week, but again, he's in a great spot. New Orleans offense is in a great spot versus Carolina this weekend, a spot you want to make sure you get a piece of in DFS, and in season long, make sure you're starting those guys against that Carolina defense. Atlanta here, Atlanta Falcons. It's going to be a shootout with Tampa Bay. I think most people are predicting that, including Vegas, but they're certainly a susceptible Defense, in terms of attacking them with the pass and attacking them with the receivers, you're looking at 39 plus on DraftKings, 32 plus on FanDuel. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, all those receivers that are associated with that concentrated pass attack for Tampa Bay, all in great spots. Consider them an elite matchup this week against the Atlanta Falcons. Tight end position is pretty rough this weekend, especially with my favorite team to attack, the Arizona Cardinals, off the board on a bye. But we're going to make do here with Tampa Bay, Green Bay, Dallas, Oakland, and Pittsburgh as the top 5 defenses going into week 12 that you can attack with tight ends based upon defense versus position data. You're looking at Tampa Bay giving up by far the most amount of points on the board this weekend at 18 plus on DraftKings, 14 plus on FanDuel. Talking about Hooper, who I don't know if he's going to start for Atlanta, but if not, you could look at a backup tight end possibly. I would stick with the wide receivers in this game. Unless Hooper plays, he's again in a great spot in a game that should be a shootout between Tampa Bay and Atlanta. Green Bay giving up 15 plus on DraftKings, nearly 12 on FanDuel to the tight end position. George Kittle, again, he's injured, but we saw a big game, a 2-touchdown game from Dwelley last week, so certainly consider the San Francisco tight ends on primetime slates. We also have the Dallas Cowboys, a continued team or a continued defense to be on this list here, giving up 15 plus on DraftKings, nearly 12 on FanDuel. They face off against the Patriots, which very, very rarely do they get their tight ends involved, but should you want to look there, you're looking at Watson, again, a primetime slate, so maybe not for DFS, but for regular season long and anything else outside of that. We also have the Oakland Raiders landing inside the top 5 in terms of teams you can attack with tight ends this weekend, week 12 in fantasy. They face off against the New York Jets. We talked about Darnold. He's in a good spot. Well, of course, one of his receivers, he's been getting involved a little bit more each and every week, and that's Griffin, the tight end. So certainly Griffin, Darnold, that whole Jets passing attack in a good spot against the Oakland Raiders. And finally here, due to a lot of buys, we had a drop down here in list, but for this weekend, for week 12, Pittsburgh is actually entering the top 5 in terms of a team, a defense you can attack with the tight end position. They face off against Cincinnati. Not a very reliable tight end here, but somebody that you might want to consider on the cheap, and that's Tyler Eifert. And so that wraps up this week's notable matchup video. You now know the spots that are worth looking into, worth possibly attacking with both players and offenses. We discussed the top 5 players at each position versus the weakest defenses that give up the most amount of points per position. So take this to your advantage. Use this information wisely. It's obviously not the only piece of information you should use for season long or DFS, but it's a good stepping stone. It helps clear the picture and help you understand which teams, which defenses give up the most amount of points, and then you can attack from there. And I mentioned it at the beginning of this video. If you haven't done so already, go down into the description. There is a link that will take you to 4 different cheat sheets for each position. So that's quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. It's all 32 teams updated and ranked in terms of the amount of points they give up per position. These cheat sheets are helpful. They're absolutely free. I chose the destination that I chose simply so you can click, open them, and download them. There's no email sign up. There's no subscription or anything like that. It's the safest, most reliable thing that I've found to share these worksheets. And of course, if you guys have any other ideas, if I've missed anything, if there's any weird stats that you've noticed or points or players that we can certainly use this weekend based upon matchups, let me know down in the comments below. Of course, I always appreciate you guys commenting, liking these videos, and making sure you are subscribed to the channel. But that about wraps it up. I hope you guys dominate this weekend. I will see you in the next DFS specific video coming out tomorrow. Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you soon.